Okay, so there is a,
We are back online and we have Damian Leonard from the Legislative Council. And we are here to talk to the miscellaneous DMV.
great, for the record, I'm Damian Leonard from the Office of Legislative Counsel. You're looking at draft 2.2, dated February 11th at 10:37 a.m. Before I get into the draft, I just want to let the committee know that I received a handful of additional changes from DMV's attorney this morning that I'll factor into the next draft. We haven't had time to work through the language yet. And so I think we're probably looking at 6 or 7 additional, it looks like more generally technical changes and updates, but 6 or 7 additional ones that would go into a draft 3 point something. So turning to the draft, Mr. Chair, would you like me to put it up on the screen or just talk everyone through it? What's easier for the committee?
Does everybody have the draft? You've got the draft, I've got the draft, you've got it online.
3.2.
2.2.
So I think we've all got this.
Okay.
So unless you think that somebody that might be watching in would need this.
All 3 people watching the live stream.
Hey, my mom's watching.
Okay. Well, Senator,
I'll do
do you think your mom would like to see the draft, or would she like to look at the committee?
All right,
dynamic?
then we'll put the draft up for your mom.
And there'll be a test.
That's impressive.
She really cares about DMV.
It's, yeah, I think my parents know I work here, but I'm not sure they actually know what I do here. So,
Are your children watching?
Hopefully not, right?
yeah. Hopefully one of them is paying attention in school and the other one is asleep trying to get healthy. So, but all right.
And so you have a list of things that DMV has brought. And we want to make sure that we don't make any requests from anybody outside the committee and what they've got. So if anyone has contacted us about specific things that are in the bill, we'll want to hear from that and have the discussion around this day about that.
Right. And so I have only heard from DMV and from Logan, our JSL analyst. And so these changes reflect what I've heard so far. And also our committee discussion. For this very first one on page 10 at the beginning of section 7, this was a change that we discussed when I walked through the bill the first time. So providing that the veterans would also be exempt from EV infrastructure fees. And then adding the discharge under other than dishonorable conditions to make it consistent with the other exemptions.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
So we had discussed for section 6, I realize you're already past it, but we did hear from the EMS folks that the majority of EMS ambulances are in nonprofits.
Okay.
I don't know if we as collectively had agreed that we felt that was an appropriate change.
That's certainly something that we wanted to make sure that got discussed in here.
Okay.
So
Okay.
some sort of language around that.
Okay, so I think the ambulance services are already covered under an organization conducting rescue operations, but what we could say is volunteer firefighter, fire department, or other volunteer firefighting organization, or a volunteer ambulance service or other organization conducting rescue operations.
If you could just incorporate some language and we'll come back around
Great.
and take a look at that. But it was our intention not to leave it both.
Okay. I will make a note of it.
Thank you.
Okay, the next change is in section 8. This is something that Logan caught. I had called these driver's licenses, and they're actually operator's licenses. So thank you, Logan. That is a rookie mistake on my part. Getting on to skip way ahead here. Okay. So on to page 19, section 15. Motorcycle instructors. We added the clarifying language of 2 years of licensed experience as a motorcycle operator instead of just experience as a motorcycle operator. So it's a key distinction. And then moving on, the next change was proposed by DMV, I think during our discussions the last time we looked at the bill. And this is the computation of taxable costs on motor vehicle transfers. The commissioner may compute and assess the tax due and notify the purchaser verbally if the purchaser is at a DMV location or immediately by mail, and the purchasers shall remit the same within 15 days after notice is sent or provided. So that's basically just saying that the DMV staff person at the DMV location can tell from when their tax due without having to also put a letter in the minutes. In section 18, I had inadvertently omitted the word tax, I believe. Oh no, I had a couple extra words after this that were unnecessary. So, and that is just a correction there. So we've eliminated those words. So to be eligible to receive a refund, a person shall submit a request for a refund in 1 year after paying the tax. We originally included some language saying unless otherwise provided pursuant to a different provision of law, but this is the only provision of law governing this particular tax. Okay. Okay, next change is on page 33, section 27. If you remember, we were clarifying here that alcohol concentrations at or above the legal limits would result in a civil suspension, and this is an instance where I had missed an instance of above to correct it to at or above. And then this is another instance here, adding H on page 35, where I had missed an at or above. So we've added H. You'll notice there are no changes, lines 10 through 17. And then we omit the subdivisions until we get to subdivision D. Whether the test was taken and the test results indicate that the person's alcohol concentration was at or above the legal limit specified. So again, this was just another section where I missed the at or above. And if you look on page 36, no additional changes in there. And I believe that brings us to the very end of the bill. That's it for changes so far. So the next version of the bill will probably add a handful of sections, as well as anything the committee decides it may or may not want to add to the bill if there is anything. But I can have that out in either late this week or at the beginning of next week.
Yeah. We'll get it together. We'll have that discussion. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Chair Wiseman. I think you may have kind of answered my question. But my question was going to be, we have multiple bills on the wall that would have relevance in the DMV miscellaneous bill. I'm thinking S4, S44, and S46. And I didn't know how you wanted us to proceed for having those considerations.
So
That's legal trails, loggers, and then the noise pollution prevention bill, which we're gonna, sorry, S-66, not.
Well, I think we're gonna take up the noise bill on Friday. We're gonna take each of these up and have in our, and we'll make a judgment on where the best place to be. I would say to you that after speaking with Damien in that S4, I haven't really, and I would ask, I haven't heard anyone raise any real objections to that at this table. Is that correct?
This is legal trails.
And after speaking with Damien, I did speak with Damien and say that if he could take a look at it, where we would, did he think a good place to put it? He thought maybe an amendment to the T-bill when it came over might work well. So I think when he comes back, we'll have that conversation with him about where, as draftsperson, he thinks the best place for it to land would be. Because I don't think there's anybody here that has any, as we said, any objection to that. And we'd like to get in on something that we know is got a good chance of getting through.
Okay, so if I'm understanding correctly, we're not putting it in the DMV miscellaneous bill based on recommendation from council for germaneness more towards T-bill?
We'll see when he gets some language where he wants to put it, and if we all think it works. So, but we're headed in the direction where, with Damien saying, where would it fit best in statute?
And so just for clarity with S4, the legal trails bill, you're amending Title 19
So,
and Title 24. So DMV bill typically focuses on Title 23, and occasionally you get into Title 32 if you're talking about some of the tax issues. But just from a historical perspective, I mean, you can put what you want where, but this might have a lot more commonality with the T-bill. And it, you know, there are provisions that are being discussed on the House side in the T-bill that are in the same subchapters as some of the provisions in S4. So there's much more alignment there, at least subject matter wise, for germaneness purposes.
okay, and that's a preference over trying to pass as an individual bill out of this committee?
Well, as I personally look at it, and I think the league is interested in the bill, and we've had no one testify against the bill. And I think there's an interest around the table of getting the bill through. The T-bill is more of a must-pass bill and a lot safer than any bill going out on its own. So it would be my recommendation to the committee, given what council has said to us, that he put together the language, and at that point, if somebody wanted us to do it as an individual bill, I'm happy to consider that. But my recommendation to the committee would be, let's move that one along on the safest vehicle we can find.
So thank you, Mr. Chair. So I received some information from a constituent about registration. So this is a DMV thing. And I don't want to have the conversation now because it gets complicated, but it's about registrations that are not available for older cars, for the classic cars.
Mhm.
And maybe you talked about this last year. But evidently the new system doesn't allow folks to do what they were able to do previously.
Yep.
So I would just like to understand that more and see if there's a way to fix the problem. And I tried to send the email to you, Commissioner. I don't know if it went through, but I can talk to you. It would have been just an app.
Oh,
But that would definitely be a DMV
Yep.
bill, so I can,
Yep.
if you want, I can talk offline to the commissioner
I-
to
I
understand.
think as we circle back around on that, that's certainly one of the issues, and if you could do a little runaround about that. I would. I think that's a good thing. I would say to you, I don't think we're ready to go on anything or willing to, but the issues raised about the purchase and use tax and the transfer. I'm interested in maybe putting some language in a study or some look at the issue by DMV and asking for recommendations about how this ought. Is there a way that it could work better? I personally think that we make it hard on lower income people that are buying vehicles, and the system is in some degrees not fair to lower income people. And I would like to see maybe some recommendations coming back for next year that we could work on, that we could take a look at more seriously, but I haven't totally given up on the idea of looking at the issue.
Okay, thank you.
Did you have considerations for the other two bills I mentioned? How would you like to proceed with the loggers purchase?
I think I would say to the committee that the loggers bill is, there are questions about where the line and where the equipment are, and it's going to be a bill that whatever, if we decided to try to put it on something else, it automatically takes that issue and sends it to finance. And if you carry that out to the process, it's been the tradition in finance that they want to look at every single section of the bill that you send over. So you would not only end up that one particular piece, but you end up arguing everything else that's in your bill. And so from my vantage point, the logger in that piece, there are some questions about what the definitions are that we're going to have to work through. And I personally am sympathetic to the loggers in their equipment that they use directly to do their business.
Mhm.
When I see someone that has a pickup, that uses the pickup, yes, for part of the day for that, but it is really their vehicle, their pleasure vehicle also to get around. I'm not sure how I feel about that. And want to have the discussion in here about what the definitions are and what fits better within that. So my tendency with that would be to recommend to this committee that that's a standalone bill by itself. And we vote that out because we know when we vote that out, it's immediately going to finance. And there'll be a discussion. And I think we need to pay attention to, we don't have good numbers on costs yet. There's a number of issues that we're going to be asked about around that. The noise bill that we're taking up here on Friday, it will be our first time as a whole committee going through that section by section. And until we do all of that, I'm not predisposed to what the committee might want to do. So at that point, after we have that, I think there's a lot of people that are beginning to request coming in on that. And after Friday, I think we'll have a better grounding in this committee. And from the people I'm hearing, we're probably going to want to have more people in to talk about that and how to do that. And how we open the committee up will depend on how many people we hear from and that want to come in.
Sure. So on the loggers bill, then on 44, I think. What I think I'm hearing you say is that your recommendation as the chair is you don't want us to include it in the DMV bill. And that instead you prefer us to go down the path of passing it as an individual bill. And if that's the case, when would you like us to bring? So the points you raised were, you don't want it to be a pleasure vehicle and.
I brought up,
Do you mind if
I brought
I
up,
could just finish what I was saying?
yep, go ahead.
The reason I'm bringing that up is because we did discuss the agricultural language and how they list that use of being, what, like 75% or more on for agricultural use is kind of the distinction. How would you like an individual senator like myself or others to put language that addresses those concerns at this vantage point? Because it sounds like your recommendation as the chair is not to move forward with it in the DMV bill. So how would you like us to make those recommendations to resolve the concerns that you raised?
I think the first thing that I would say to you is, Logan, can you explain some of the issues that you think, after doing some research, need to be highlighted?
Sure. For the record, Logan Miller at the Joint Fiscal Office. When I look at this bill, when I attempt to sort of forecast what revenue impact it might have, there's some questions. And again, this would get into sort of, or legal question, the definitional question of what exactly would be exempt. And then the question of how to sort of estimate these new exemptions, given that there is no real concrete data on like what already exists out there. So I think, and I don't know where the chair wants to go or how he wants to address these things, but I think to come up with a concrete sort of estimation of fiscal impact, there would just need to be some more sort of refining of the definition and addressing the extent that motor vehicles counts towards with 75% or however they want to do it. So it'd really just be, I guess, working with ledge counsel and myself to would be figure out something that is doable. I don't know.
Yeah, so how do you want to do that?
I think at this table, we're gonna have to get people in front of us to define better with ledge counsel and the staff. What do we really want? Therein will back in to fill in pieces of what Logan is raising for issues. We're gonna have to define for ourselves. I gave my view on where I'm worried about where the line is. But I think that has to be a discussion of this committee as a whole.
So how would you like me to proceed then?
I think we're gonna take it up, we're gonna have to take it up as a committee with Michael Grady, who drafted this. And we're gonna have to hammer out what we think are close, so it will be on the schedule.
Okay.
I just wanted, there were a few things that I think maybe one or two of them I did have brought up before, but some more questions, just wondering, given crossover coming up about when I should present these ideas. One was about maybe we learned about this, the fee for the learners permits and license fees for children that are in DCF custody, basically. I can't remember if we found out that they were.
Does DMV collect those fees?
Yeah, but I can't remember because I think I remember it was an issue, but I can't remember if we got it resolved.
So Aaron Collier, Commissioner DMV for the record. So currently the process that happens now is DCF through one of their caseworkers will use one of the department credit cards to pay. We are, I think it was language last year in the bill to find a better mechanism for not having, because it gets complicated, DCF to try to find someone with a credit card who's able to find a better solution. So we are working with DCF. There's some emails just last week. To propose to figure out kind of the best path forward, and then with proposed language, I think it'd be for next session. If we can figure out how best to improve the process. But currently, right now,
With legislative language, this session held.
Well, I think we could direct DMV with DCF to come up with a solution and bring it back in the context of a T-bill next year, or I would rather not be silent
Yeah.
and we instruct them to do something.
Right, and it could just be our intent is to make them not pay, and then you guys figure out the best way between DC and DMV to not charge, maybe.
just clarify for DCF not to pay or for DMV to absorb the.
Well, I guess you could go either way, either DMV to absorb not charging the fees for those children or having DCF. But, you know, I guess I thought about.
Because as it stands right now, so if someone in DCF custody comes in, the DCF is paying us with a credit card. So we're just trying to find a way that removes the credit card process from it and allows the transaction to kind of flow as an interdepartmental.
So these are for kids that are wards of the state.
Correct, yes, we're not doing a lot of.
And how many are we talking about?
The number I heard the other week's probably around 500 that we see.
Annual?
And how much is the fee?
$29. It's the learner's permit we're talking about, right?
Yeah. So DCF is just giving us a credit card currently, which causes trouble on the DCF side. So that's what we're working with them. They're trying to figure out how best to.
So we're talking about $15,000.
How about just something like bill back authority on your book?
Yeah, we could either say they don't pay because it's coming out of one pocket of the other, or have a better system for, because I got the impression that some of them did not deal with the complications, were just paying it because they couldn't figure out the administrative process. But that's just one issue, the purchase and sale value on the corn, which you mentioned. And then there was, in this committee, we talked a lot about the inspection process and how it relates to rotor rust. And I've gotten a lot of new complaints this year. DMV sent out a memo last year to all the stations talking about how surface rust is not a reason for failing an inspection. But I continue to get constituents that would show me pictures. In fact, I have a rotor from Senator McDonald who brought it in here and put it in the drawer to show like he failed the inspection.
Is it still in there?
It's still in there, yeah.
Dang it, throw it out.
Man,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So McDonald's said that this failed inspection.
you want it, Senator?
No.
So you get also the job of being our,
That doesn't even have a lot of rotor, like, some of them can be.
On the other side.
There's a little bit on
The other
the,
side.
Yeah, some of them can look very rusty, but it's just the surface rust if you just break.
sorry,
it.
David.
Yeah.
I think it's just part of their talking about, probably.
yeah.
Well, it's supposed to be, if you read the inspection manual, it's the break surface part,
Uh-huh.
you know, and if there's 3
Yeah.
inches of surface rust, but it has to be pitting, actually causing it to not break. But, so I just wondered if we could ask DMV to continue to send that memo out for a few more years, because I got the impression that the inspections stations didn't kind of see the memo or read the memo.
Sorry, David.
It's okay.
You like this?
I'm just gonna have to No, that's my, sure.
Sorry. Totally sorry.
That's fine. I do enjoy this stuff when I'm not in
Yeah.
a suit.
Yeah,
If I know you're gonna get a messy, I do.
yeah, I forgot to tell you.
I would just say to you that there's all kinds of issues around people buying vehicles and in inspection. I know that we have bills coming our way about eliminating inspections. That whole issue of lower income people particularly that are buying secondhand vehicles and what we charge for purchase and use, and then the troubles they run into with this, with the check engine light being on. I'm kind of at a loss on how we create a discussion about all of that going forward. And what do we do to be thoughtful about this? I'm not sure we can do that quickly, but what do we?
Well, the very, we could take more testimony about if DMV's, program, if they find that there's been more complaints or more failures. But at the very least, sending the memo out again, because there's a lot of stories of people that get a car, they say that they take it and get inspected, it says it's got rotor rust, you gotta get new rotors, so they gotta grind the rotors, and that's like $1,700 or $1,200 that they don't have.
Well, and that isn't in, and when they get the purchase and use, if they've just bought the car and then they get a bill for $1,700, that the car wouldn't be worth $1,700 if you
Right.
knew that.
And often we've heard a lot of testimony the last couple of years that a lot of the inspection stations blame the state. They say, oh, well, the state changed the rules and you can't have rust on the rotors, and they can look rusty. And so people feel like they don't know if they don't feel like they have an option to say no. But this memo that went out also required the stations to post where you could, if you have a question or a complaint, to let them know that you call DMV and say like, yeah.
I want to be thoughtful about all of this. I'd like to do something that, the bigger question for me is how does this committee create a discussion around that that's thoughtful?
Yes.
And I totally sympathetic to the inspection pieces and all of that. But, and I wish the senator from Windsor was here. I think some instruction in the miscellaneous DMV bill is not a bad place to put that. And put that link. We could do something in the T bill later on in the session in it. But I do think that the miscellaneous DMV bill is not a bad place to say. And I generally don't like summer study committees, but how do we create that discussion going forward? Is it instructing DMV to come back to it, or how? I'm not sure how to handle it.
I just want to bring it up as one issue.
And I totally appreciate it because I think it fits in all of that. If I've got a car and I just bought a car and I pay $8,000 for it, the agency or the DMV says it's worth $10,000 in the blue book, but it's really only worth $10,000 in the blue book if I get the rotor fixed. How do you reconcile that?
Yeah, and we need to include safety as part of that conversation.
Yep.
It's not.
No, you're totally.
Yeah.
Not, how do I be fair to people and do that?
Yeah.
This doesn't happen with newer vehicles that you buy off the lot that are worth $80,000.
Or at least we have a process for that.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think it's, you know, so,
Sorry about that.
No, it's fine.
so
My fault.
Damien, if you have, suggestions of other things other places have done to create that sort of discussion.
I don't.
But if you could,
I will take a look to see what's out there and, our counterparts here from the department may also have some
yeah,
thoughts.
and
on
they've
other
heard
ways,
the
so,
complaint, so, you know,
um,
they can, we'd encourage them to come to the table with some ideas. Because if they don't, they may not like our ideas. Sorry, Commissioner.
Good, sir.
So is there anything else in here?
Nothing from me today.
Okay.
And like I said, next week I'll have at least a handful of new sections for the committee
Okay.
to look at. And then if there's need for additional language on, foster children within the DCF system or inspection clarifications, I can also work on that as we start to figure out next steps.
Yeah,
But I-
to support the questions from the senator from Washington, I would say that I don't want to remain silent on those kids that are wards of the state.
Mhm.
You know, from my point of view, those kids have had a rougher start in life than most. And if they're out getting a license and trying to start their lives, this is not a big deal for the state. But it's a big deal for these kids. Go ahead.
I agree with you. Thank you. And then, can we, and maybe this is already happening, but can we make sure that they can get driver's ed at no cost?
There already is a program for them. They have I think we got them a car one year and we got them they have an instructor.
One for the whole state though?
I think it was one car for the whole state, I think, but I think they did have some different instructors that they worked on. There's a program, that's all I heard.
Okay.
We could
Well,
get some more.
and let's see how the programs work. Thank you.
So for now, while we're figuring out exactly what we need on the issue of foster children, I'm going to add a placeholder.
Okay.
And then, we can fill that in with the appropriate language once we know,
Okay.
have a little bit of an update on what's happening.
Do you have any comments for us? And why don't you take the chair?
Try to clean up.
No, we'll keep it.
Spray that to
Yeah, it's kind of cool.
Good paperweight.
Yeah.
Good morning, Andrew Collier again, Christian DMV. Reference purchase and use, if you don't mind just jumping around here,
Sure.
what were different topics. I think there's and this is dangerous because I'm just spitballing off the top of my head here, but what if we had a mechanism where if the repairs that are reported from an inspection station, because I know we charge her on the registration, but if you go in and get an inspection, and it's not going to pass because of rotors, tires, and you go and get a copy of how much that'll cost repair, then maybe there's maybe there's a mechanism in there that you reduce your
One of the fees.
your value
Oh,
based off what that cost of passing.
I'm not opposed to considering that. What I'm suggesting to you is, how do we have a discussion to vet those kind of ideas? And so by next year, we came back with something that would. Because I'm just afraid that any of us has an idea. Somebody will blow a hole in it someplace.
Absolutely.
And so I'd like to do something that's thoughtful. And, And we can stand up on the floor and feel confident that if we get questions, we can answer that. So I'm not it, but I really do think that there are a lot of questions about inspections. There are a lot of questions about the exact issue that we're talking. So if you could think about what's a deliberate way to move forward on this? To have a discussion. And Pat?
Well, I'm just wondering, trying to recall the past, which is quite a few years ago when we talked about this in House Transportation. We did take some testimony and some expert testimony, I guess you could call it, from DMV enforcement.
Yep.
Who deal with it, on a regular basis. No offense to you, but
Yeah, no.
you don't get under the trucks and pound the tires and check brakes and stuff like some of those guys boots on the ground do.
And I would just ask, 'cause I know the word summer study, which is some of us.
Well, that may not be the way to go. I'm
but-
just looking for,
Yeah.
what would you say? How would you, if we wanted to take a look at the issue,
Yep. I think having our enforcement section that deals with this, start that conversation, I think is probably the best way to get going. My only thing about the summer study, I just wanted to flag is we're not losing as in personnel, but a lot of the staff is on the IT project upgrade this summer for testing, starting I think end of March through August. So, and then through the rollout through November. So it's just, we're going to be bare bones on staff. The enforcement team, not so much. So that's a great avenue, and they already deal with the inspection. So just flagging that as a resource allocation on that side of the house. The non-enforcement side of the house is we're kind of pinching pennies there, if you will, on staff. But I believe the enforcement team hears the complaints from public. They also work with the inspection stations. They work with dealers. I think that
who should be involved? Enforcement, who should be involved? And what's the mechanism that we should?
yeah, absolutely.
If you can get back to us with a suggestion about how we just have a discussion of this stuff.
Can do that.
And I don't know what the will of the committee, and as I said, Senator White's not right here, and I know she has had opinions about this. But if we could talk about where we think language that would create a discussion should go. I think miscellaneous DMV is a potential vehicle. Also, I think that, the T-bill would be a potential vehicle. And so I would look for feedback from anybody on the committee.
If you don't mind if I interject.
Is there?
Seems like the miscellaneous bill is more on the technical side, and there's just some areas I just want to make sure that if things get added on, that may stymie its movement, that we just pull out what those technical, like the DUI enforcement language, and some areas around the tax, the length of the refund for tax. There's just some technical items in there that I think are more pressing that we see move forward.
I'm hoping that we can keep this as clean as we can. I don't think some language around $15,000 in words of the state should hold this up.
Oh, absolutely not.
I don't think some sort of, whether it's a study committee or looking for some recommendation of how to deal with low-income people in purchase and use and inspections, shouldn't hold this up.
Absolutely not. My comment is strictly on any of the bills, whether, I know we came in and spoke about the logging bill. I know you folks have been discussing that. I just wanted to flag that from our perspective. There's just some
We need
more
to
technical.
we need to sort our feelings out about the logging bill. And we do have the 14th of March as a deadline. So we need to be thinking about what those definitions are. Because we'll see about that bill. It needs to stand on its own 2 feet, in my opinion. And because it will immediately go to finance. But, you know, what we think is the definitions within the bill right now, as I understand from Logan, are not clear. Go ahead.
On the logging, the definitions are not clear.
Yeah.
Yes, that, I just wanna.
Yeah.
Understand,
And,
so,
and that really is, to me, a policy decision that this committee has got to struggle with.
right, and I see it as an economic development issue. kind of.
Yep.
So, so just to get back to what you were saying, Mr. Chair, but, so purchase and use and inspections and low income. I thought purchase and use was a separate, conversation than the inspections.
Well,
Or
well,
were you just listing the?
I was
the
just
things?
listing because here's the issue. If it's $2,000 to get the brakes fixed, Kelly Blue Book doesn't know that. And so it gets into, I just bought a new car. I paid a certain amount for it. I paid that amount because I knew it had to be fixed up. And in many respects, for that low income person, the inspection and what I paid for it all bump up against each other.
Right, so I see that as the establishment of the purchase and use that an individual pays is that issue, but then where the purchase and use goes once it comes into the state, that's a different issue,
Yes.
right? Okay, so are we talking about that being in the DMV bill? I wouldn't think that it would be.
No,
Okay, good,
no,
I just.
no,
All right,
I was thinking about
okay,
what I'm thinking about the individual. I just bought a car.
right,
It's got some rust. It's got some issues. I paid for that car. How does DMV deal with, that?
right. And then the issue that we haven't talked about yet about the plastic cars, that's another, it's basically how do you calculate the purchase in different situations.
And I would,
And that
I would-
seems to me to be DMV.
yeah, if I were you, I would quickly put together some language. And we'll-
Right. I need help identifying the problem, as you'll see when you read the
Okay.
email.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And I think that with that, there might be a couple of areas, a couple of vehicles going through that would that we might be able to work on that with. I think that, of course, the DMV bill is prime for that, but it may not be, we're getting late enough in the process where it might not be.
And it might not need legislation. It might be a technical internal thing too.
Yeah.
Or it might just
So-
be
Repeat.
an issue.
So I would encourage you
Yes.
to get together.
Yes. Thank you. I will.
So is there anything else in here that you've heard?
From what I heard, we have no no qualms about.
And there's nothing else that we're missing that you think should be in here.
We, as Damien mentioned, we have a couple more technical corrections, and the only larger one, what we've discussed is the tinted windows. And after reviewing that, the language we're proposing is removing that language that was passed last year, reverting back to what the prior language was on the tinted windows.
Okay,
Yeah, I would like to hear more about that. We spent a lot of time on it.
So there is
We don't
a,
have to do that. That's the-
if we, I think now's a good time to bring that up because it is in this, and we should talk about.
so in preparing to move the tinted window inspection, because that's going in the inspection manual, in reviewing that, it was found that there's a federal code or section that references the tinted windows, which doesn't actually define when you go to that section. It brings you to another section, which then points you to the SAE manual, which costs $44 to purchase. So we purchased that, and within that, it's a very engineering technical book that we're having trouble deciphering what it tinted window means. And then as we look at the tinted window section, if you implement it, then you have to also purchase the inspection stations will then have to purchase the equipment to measure the light refraction. Which is an added cost, which I wasn't here last year. I'm not sure if that was contemplated as well.
Yeah, we love
So really, we're having a hard time deciphering what you define, what is actually the definition of the tinted window. Because some manufacturers now are darkening the windows because of the AC requirements. So are those now, is that technically tinted window? It's hard for us to decipher what it is. My personal take when I came in and I read through it, just from my time as enforcement, there's a ticket that you can write for tinted windows that covers this. So just trying to, we're having trouble sussing out how to interpret what was passed last
So
year.
does the tinted window thing did it go into effect this last July?
So the language forces the DMV to go through rulemaking, reopen the inspection manual, put in whatever that new language is for tinted windows, how to define it by July 1st of 26. So we have to start the rulemaking soon to get that process started. Again, when you read the technical sections from the federal bill, it doesn't explain.
Did the tinted window stuff make it more tinted or less? Can you go back and say what it was?
Commissioner,
It's so right now on the when you inspect your vehicle, it's an advisory that it's not a legal piece of equipment on your vehicle, but it's as an advisory. So you as an operator, you're taking that chance that you're going to get pulled over and might get a ticket for it.
Right.
This is forcing us to reopen the inspection manual, make it a failure, and also define what is a tinted window.
But can you just go back to the very beginning of saying, because I thought that in Vermont, you couldn't have tinted windows on the front windows, but you can have tinted windows on the back windows.
So
So just go back to the very beginning, please.
yeah,
like, as
so
if you were
you cannot, correct. So your front driver's windshield, you cannot, and your side, front, driver's side and passenger side, right and left cannot be tinted.
And is that
So the
legislation?
legislation's for the right and left windows.
Okay,
for having that as a failure now.
Right and left on the front seat.
Yeah, from the driver's seat, yes, sorry.
And so what did they pass last year? What did we pass last year?
It is for the department to make it a failure on the inspection manual. And then within the inspection manual, and then it's defining a federal rule that is supposed to, I think the intention was to define what tinted window but that rule doesn't match. And then when you follow that rule through some other iterations of it, it brings it to a vehicle manual for engineers for the motor vehicle industry. And even when you look through that, it's
Okay, so let me just make sure I understand. So it sounds like the intent was to better enforce the regulation against tinted windows. Because it sounds like there was a feeling or assumption that folks were getting away with having tinted windows when they shouldn't have. Is that accurate?
I believe so. I think that's
Okay, but I just didn't know why we did what we did, but it was to enforce the existing regulation more fully, it sounds. And, or if it could have even been, I just tried to figure out.
I wasn't here, so.
Yeah, I wasn't.
I
either,
don't
so
know.
That's what I was looking for Andy.
I don't know what the time, because we do have legislation that for law enforcement to act upon that. So I'm not,
Okay,
so I'm not, to be honest with
Okay.
you, I'm not really sure what,
so I think we should know that before we
Right, and
propose
the
change.
bill would reverse what we did last year.
correct.
So I think we need a little more clarity around all of this.
Absolutely, but you know, and that if the legislature still wants to move forward with that, we do need some clarification on the what 10.
No, this is before my time, but I've got the language up on my laptop.
Who drafted this?
Oh, so that's a great question. Last year's bill was a team effort. It was started by Anthea before she left. Donna Russo Savage took it over for the few weeks that she was with us, filling in temporarily, and then Jen Carvey from our office finished up. So there were 3 different attorneys that worked on the bill last year.
Lovely.
I can talk to Jen about whether she has more background on this. But she may not have a lot of the sort of policy background. It may have already been a done deal by the time she got to the bill. I can walk you through the language and show you what DMV is proposing later this week or early next week. And then we can get a more
Well, it
detailed
would
discussion.
be helpful if we had somebody that knew a little of the history.
And I can get as much history as I can on it between now and.
Yeah,
and the
that would be very helpful to understand what the issues were and why they did what they did. And because I totally get if there's we're still far enough out, so it would just be rule making. And my sense is that if you're having trouble writing the rules based around all of this, I'm not afraid to say we're going to put this off 6 months. What I'm a lot less inclined is to say, not knowing any more than I know, that I just want to chuck all the language.
No, absolutely, that's fair. Yeah, I think maybe once we have a full understanding of the history, dive into it some more.
Okay. So we got tinted lights, or tinted windshield.
Windows,
Oh,
not
windows.
People aren't trying that, are they?
No, it'd be
The side
The side windows.
door windows.
There's also tinting along the top of the windshield, which
Oh.
is permissible at certain levels. But beyond which, would not be permissible.
We got wards of the state. We've got the whole purchase and use and how we might study this. We have your issue of antique.
Yes, and it has to do with titles and registrations and, my constituents believe that it was much better under the other system. But obviously there were reasons why you changed. I don't know if it was with the, just, it may have gotten too complicated when you did the, the new system. But, right now, if I'm saying it right, if you have a car that's older than 25 years and you don't have a title, and often you don't have a title from cars that you bought from a farm, that was in a barn, that DMV used to provide a title, and now they have to go get a bonded title, and that's an expense. And it could lead to having these cars not be able to be legally sold. So it could have the intent was to bring everything into legal status. It might have a negative, might have an unintended consequence. So, but you and I will talk about it, but that's what it's about.
Yep.
It's about old vehicles. Nice old vehicles.
Am I missing anything?
Saleable. Nice. Classic.
So my list is, wards of the state, inspection clarifications, classic car titles and registration, and window tinting.
Yep.
And then just, for the next version of the bill, adding the DMV provisions for review and the ambulance service clarifications. That's what I've got right now.
Okay.
And not S4, not S46 or
None of your bills.
none of my bills, just to be very clear, the ones that I had pre-written legislation on that you asked me.
That S4, I think we heard from Damien fits better in transportation. And, I think the noise bill, we're gonna hear from Friday and we'll make a decision on where to go. We need to struggle with, the forestry bill to figure out exactly what the definitions are, because I think there's not clarity around what is in the bill now. So as a committee, I want us to struggle with what do we want the policy to be there.
Okay, so, but we don't want to direct Damien to do any work on it.
If he can get clarity, with that reflects what the 5 members of this committee think, I'm happy with that, if he, do you know what we think?
Not yet. So, I lost track of which specific policy proposal you were referring to while I was checking on. something else.
The
loggers.
forestry.
So my understanding is right now there are concerns about how do you ensure that the truck is or the vehicle is primarily used for logging and it's not incidentally used.
Yes.
Similar to what we have with the agricultural vehicles.
Yeah, I'll just speak for myself. If you have a pickup, I've got an F-350 or something, or even a small one.
Right.
And I'm using it to lug around with equipment and at the job site. But I also use it as my pleasure vehicle.
Right.
How do we deal with it?
Right, and I think, one of the things that may be helpful for the committee. I don't have the answer for you. But one of the things that may be helpful for the committee is to look at similar exemptions that we provide for things like agricultural vehicles, because you have the same issue, for example, with a farmer who has a pickup truck that they use to pull equipment around, deliver seeds or whatever to the fields or feed to their animals. But they also use it to go to the grocery store and go up dinner.
I think any information in that could be brought back to this table would be helpful.
Okay. So I will make a note, touch base with Mike. He has a lot more background on the logging equipment than I do. And he's probably a better place to start on some of that discussion. I know we've been discussing that question internally because we heard it from a lot of people after his initial testimony. So, and I'll get what information I can or let you know that he's ready to come back in. I don't know what his schedule is. I know he's got a lot, that's coming up against the deadline right now. He got a boatload of requests at the very last minute this year. So, but I will make a note.
Thank you.
Examples,
appreciate that.
yeah, I think examples for this table to consider will be great.
Beautiful. I really appreciate that.
I think at this point, we're kind of exhausted. We're pretty close to our morning. And I think I'll try to get some gloves and move the
Yeah.
road.
Yeah, I
Put it
know.
back in.
My
Thank you, Mark, for
Well,
Which are-
like,